Hello there, it's Paul here and welcome on everyone. And for those who follow me regularly, you'll notice that I have a new lathe. So I've gone for the Axe Minister Trade AT406WL. This is also going to be my very first turning. I'm going to attempt a three-piece goblet. You might ask, why would you want to do a three-piece goblet rather than the one piece like I did on a previous video a couple of videos ago? As far as I'm concerned, there's three reasons. One could be that you've actually managed to succeed in doing the Mike Waldt UKIS Flying Goblet, where you're just left with the bowl part of the goblet, so therefore you need to produce yourself a stem and base. Another option might be that you're not confident enough to have that larger piece of wood on the lathe, especially when you're hollowing out the bowl. With a long piece of wood you get a lot of vibration, and as you see in the last video I had my steady rest on. The third option might be that you actually want to produce something with all different woods, which is what I'm going to do in this video. I'm going to try and concentrate on only turning small pieces, maybe 12-18 inches long at the most, depending on how long I do the stem. Now I've got a piece of wood here that somebody gave me just recently. I don't know what it is. They seem to think that it was ash before they gave it to me, but cutting into it, as far as I'm concerned, that's not ash. This is also fairly wet as well. I put the moisture meter on this and it registered 25% after I cut it. It's fairly big at nearly 100mm, just under 4 inches square. And I've cut it off at about 150mm long, 6 inches. There are some cracks developing on the end which wasn't cut. So what I'm going to do first of all, I'm going to true this up, get a tenon on it so I can get it into my jaws. Now just true this up. It is a fairly soft wood, so whether it's a poplar or something like that I don't know. There's certainly no way that's ash. Just took a moisture reading on the outside here and it's about 16%, and because of these check marks that I've got just on here, they don't look like they're too deep, so I'm just going to take a few passes over the top here. Now I've still got a bit of a crack just there, so I think what I'm going to do, I'm just going to turn the shape of the bowl on here, because I'm going to probably come down to that sort of size, so I'm going to take a fair bit off and then I'll hollow that out, and if I have to fill anything then I'll deal with that as I come along. So I'm getting a little bit of tear out on there, but what I'm going to do next is I'm going to just drill a depth hole in there. That's probably about the width size of the cup in actual fact I'm going to go for, so it's fairly big, and get the depth hole drilled to somewhere around about here and then hollow out. I've got quite a nice shape inside there, and all I've done now is just sanded this to 180. However, after inspecting the outside here properly, the cracks, I've got 2 or 3 cracks around here, and they go down as far as this pencil line here. And what I think I'm actually going to do, I'm actually going to turn this top off, and then I might well just change the profile a little bit on the inside there again. Now I've sanded this to 240, so just 180 and 240, and rather than just put sanding sealer on there, and I was probably going to do Yorkshire Grit and maybe a wax of sort, I might even go for like the Bry wax again, like I did with the other goblet. I'm going to use my Walnut Colouring again, which you've probably seen me use on a few videos. I used it on the rings on the last goblet, and it's just water based. Now I've just took a moisture reading on this, and the highest I can find on the inside here is about 16%, so I'm now throwing more water on it, and I want to build up some of the colour here and then sand it all back. And I should probably also, just like I say, Yorkshire Grit this to see what sort of effect it has on this. Especially with sort of like putting this base coat of colour underneath first. And I need to do the colour first because Yorkshire Grit, if I do use that, has some waxes in it. So it's got some beeswax, and I think it's got some oil in there as well to obviously lubricate it as it goes. And so therefore that will effectively help to seal the surface, and if I try and put colour on again with that, it's not going to penetrate into the wood. Now this has had one coat of the walnut colouring, then I sanded it back after it had mostly dried out with some 240, and then I've given it another coat again, so it's fairly dark on there. So I've just gently sanded that back with the 240, and just going to put some sanding sealer on there. Now because the colours are water based, they're obviously going to run a little bit, which isn't so much a problem, because the good thing is it will also sort of help blend any odd patches in as well. That's come up quite nice with the Yorkshire Grit. I was going to use my Bry wax on this again with the coloured wax, but then when I realised that there's no real texture with the grain, it's not really going to give any colour on there. It works really well on things like ash and oak where you've got the deep grain. It just fills it in and gives you all that colour. So I've decided to go for Woodwax 22 and the Microcrystaline Wax. Now the Woodwax 22, I can put this on and literally buff it off pretty quickly afterwards. The Microcrystaline Wax I've got to leave on for about 15-20 minutes before I buff that off. This has now been left another 24 hours, and even though that's only 7mm on there, it's actually quite strong, so hopefully this isn't going to fly off. Shouldn't need any support, but I might bring up the tailstock with a tennis ball in a moment. But I'm just going to sand this back again now with the 240, and then I will give that a coat of sanding sealer and the Yorkshire Grit and some wax again like I've done on the inside. The bowl part now is complete, and as you can see there, I've just got a little spigot on there, but just under 7mm wide, which is what's going to be used to locate it against the stem. For the stem, I'm using a piece of Iroko I've got here, so I'm just going to get this trued up and then into the jaws. Now that is definitely not a Iroko. I'd say that's very, very similar to the wood that I've just made the bowl of the goblet out of, and the torque on that one could be it's either tulip wood or lime wood, and this is very, very similar as well. Now, I was hoping it's going to be a Roco, because the Roco has a little bit of depth to the grain to it, so even though you sand it, you don't get a really flat finish where this has come up. But I'm going to try anyway, just with the gold gilt cream, and because I wanted to put some of this on and basically rub it in so that it's just on the grain, because that's actually coming up probably a lot better than I thought it would. Yeah, I quite like that. Just going to leave that to dry overnight, and then I can create a proper tenon on the bottom here to then fit into the base, and I can just cut back the top there into the hole so that it fits nicely into the cup. Now, the next job I want to do here is some captive rings before I do the base, and I've got a piece of what I believe is mahogany here. This is all wood that was given to me. It was originally, I think, like a coat stand or something like that, so I've just cut this piece off here. I've not put a tenon on here or anything, so it's only really being limitedly held in my O'Donnell jaws here. I've got a fair bit of pressure on it, but hopefully it's not going to jump out, and that's why I've just really brought up the tailstock on here at the moment while I work on this side to true it up. And I'm just going to true this up, then I'm going to take the inside down to the inside size I want. Then I can then turn the captive ring on the outside here, part it off, do however many I want, and then after that I will then probably make some form of a jam chuck out of the rest of this, so that I can then turn the captive rings around and do both sides. I now have 3 captive rings that I've made. Now they're all very similar in size. We're talking under a millimetre difference on these. So I'm now going to give these a coat of sanding sealer and sand them back, and then I may well give them Yorkshire Grit again, and some form of a wax. Now the next thing I've got here is a piece of what I believe is oak. This is actually what I made the last goblet out of. So I'm going to true this up first of all, and I'm going to put a tenon on here and then shape off the top. I've got the dark bowl for the goblet, I've got the gold stem and the lighter mahogany rings. I now want to make the base darker as well, and I don't want to use the same brown as I did for the actual bowl on the goblet. So if this really is oak, which we will soon find out, I'm just going to use my ebonising solution here. It's just a homemade one, just using vinegar and steel wool dissolved in there. And there you go, you can see that's darkening up straight away. So that's, I could say that's 100% oak. So my last goblet I did, which was listed as an ash goblet, is actually an oak goblet. And as you can see, it really does make a big difference on here. So I'm going to let this dry first of all, and then I shall knock it back with a sandpaper again, and I will then probably give this at least one more coat, knock it back again, and probably a third coat to darken it right up like this. And when that's finally done, I shall then give it a coat of sanding sealer, Yorkshire Grit, and go through the waxes again. Hello there, it's Paul here, and welcome on everyone. Now yes, it's another goblet, and so it says now my fourth goblet I've done, and I think they're getting a bit more elaborate as I go along. It's also my first project on the new lathe. Now the bowl stroke cup part of the goblet, I wasn't sure of the wood. I originally thought, when I got told, we got given this piece of wood, that it was probably ash, but it just seemed really light. And I posted a picture on social media, and there was a couple of comments. People either thought it was tulip wood or lime, and I've got to say it's very light wood, and you do get a reasonable amount of tear out on it. So especially on the outside here, going over with a skew made an enormous difference. When I turned it, it was about 25%, so I did leave it over the course of about a day or two before I then sort of like did the finishing touches on it, and it got it down to about 16% moisture content, so it was reasonable. And it will just be interesting to see what happens with this over time, especially in 3 months, 6 months or whatever. Will that distort much? Will it crack? It's just time will tell. And I wanted to give it some form of a treatment. I just thought the wood was too plain. The grain was really nice, but I gave it my walnut coloured crystals again. These are water based, so I was therefore throwing even more water at the thing, and because it was already quite wet, it was taking quite a while to dry. So I'd often not sort of give it a coat, dry it with just using the air compressor to run air over it to get it as dry as possible. Sand it back, stick a second coat on, and I'd leave it overnight and then come back to it the following day. So that's sort of like where the time built up on this project. The stem, I picked up a piece of this, which I've had a fair few of these actually. I got them free from a wood mill, and I thought all of these were Rocco, and it's really strange until you get into them. You don't always know what the wood is, and most of these have been a Rocco. Some have actually even been Sapele, which has been the real funny thing for the outside colouring. but this time it was a really, really light wood again. It was like that. So it's very, very much like the cup on this. I'd say it's either something like tulip wood or lime wood again. Certainly do please comment when you look at it on the video. The captive rings this time, so much easier to do just from working on a spindle. They came out a lot more precise. For the wood, I know that for sure is mahogany. I was given a whole load from a colleague at work, and the base, which I know is oak, which is also the same wood that the last goblet was made out of, which I did label as ash. Now I wanted to get that full contrast in there, so after I'd done the walnut crystals on the bowl of the cup, for the stem I was really hoping it was going to be Oroco, because Oroco has that goldy colour to it in the first place, and it does often have like those fleckles in it, and I was going to use the gold gilt cream just to try and get into the grain to highlight it a bit more. So I was going to rub most of it all off, but in the end, because this was so plain and white, I decided to really give it a thick covering of the gilt cream. But I think it looks quite nice because it does still show the grain through it as well. The mahogany, I think, really gives that light wood colour to the whole piece, so it gives that contrast again. And again, the base, I think the oak certainly looks a lot better ebonised on there as well. Gluing, just ordinary wood PVA glue, it just went together so easily and nicely. Haven't had to prop it up or anything. All the fits were nice on there. So it's certainly an interesting project for my first one on the new lathe. Please do leave comments below. Like I say, if you think different to what the wood is for the bowl and the stem, certainly do please let me know. Thanks a lot for watching.